there is a superpower you have when you are a have-not.
Right.
You just have this such a huge burning desire of doing something, and of not knowing limitations and of not overthinking the limitations. Impact matters a lot to me, and those are the stories that I'm gravitated to. And then those are the stories I want to tell, and I enter the room with so much passion that somehow I find the money, and somehow I find people who have faith, and I've never let them down, because I think intention is where it starts from, and then the universe comes together. So I just started writing 10, 12 emails a day. And in those emails, I wrote, I am the pride of India. I would love you to sponsor me so I can go to US and attend the Oscars. My film is nominated. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Dhanam, for having me here. I do want to say that I think Malayalam cinema makes the best films in the country. I am in awe of the Kerala storytelling and filmmakers, so I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me here.
From Andheri, Mumbai to Oscars in Los Angeles, the path couldn't have been linear. It couldn't have been one straight line. It was a long, arduous one, and of course there must have been challenges, setbacks. So tell us all about that journey in your own words. Big question, I know, but yeah.
Yeah, you're ready to be here till tomorrow, right? Where do we start from? So I was born and brought up in Delhi to a very, very humble family. And, pretty much, I would say a lower middle class family with a lot of values and a lot of dreams. But I come from a very humble family. And from there to be able to get to Bombay, even that was a big deal, to just move cities and live in Bombay and to see dreams, to make films, all of them have been just, I feel like I can write a book on each of my films, the journeys of each of them, but the idea was just to tell stories. I genuinely think, and I feel that we are the stories we choose to tell. So all our time here is limited, but our stories stay back. So stories play a really important role in our lives, in our minds, in our world, in our universe. And I'm just very humbled to be a small part of it, and I do that for a profession. I tell stories. So yes, I came to Bombay as a 21-year-old with dreams in my eyes to become a producer. And like Sir said, I'm also an anomaly in my business, because I only came to realize that this is a very large family business. It's not like you can just enter and be like, hey, I want to produce a film. So technically, what we largely think producers do is sign a check. But I never came from money. So I actually am an entrepreneur who falls in love with a story, then falls in love with, how this can happen, what is our ambition, like build a vision for that film, almost like a company, like have the end goal, be like, okay, this type of a story, where has it happened in the world, and how far has it gone, and how far can we take it? These are some early questions that we ask ourselves. And then we go attach directors, actors, sometimes the stories come to us from directors. Then we go raise money and literally make a business plan. Then we execute it, market it, take it to the world, and then do it all over again. So
Guneet, I'm going to take a moment to interrupt you, because we definitely want to delve more in detail into that process. But before that, you mentioned at 21 you moved with a dream to become a producer. I mean, how do you have that clarity at 21? What's the spark that caused you have that dream even at 21?
I think humble beginnings, because, I think the biggest dream of my parents was to buy a house. And I, as a 16, 17-year-old, started working in international films being shot in Delhi. And I used to be like office intern, an office coordinator, intern, moved my way up to being a production manager. I just said yes to a lot of responsibility. And that was a very early trait of celebrating the hustle, showing up and be like, I'll figure it out, let's do it. You know, it came from my Punjabi Sikh hustling traits, you know, Jugaad 101, like I'll handle everything, you know. So I think it just came from, I was always this person. In school, I was a prefect. I was always taking more responsibilities. I was always chewing more than I could afford to. There was no sense of, you know, boundaries or comfort. It was more like, yeah, let's do it. But what drove me was that my parents really wanted to buy a house. And they just wanted one house of their own. And I wanted to make enough money so they could get their house. So I was not into going and studying higher studies. We didn't even have the money for it. I mean, my parents and I were staying in 5,000 rupees rented house. So they just really wanted to buy a 3-bedroom house in GK1 in Delhi, and that was the end of my dream. That's all I ever wanted to do. And when I started working in international films as a liaison, as a production coordinator, location manager, line producer, you keep moving up the ranks. In 5 years, I almost became the project head, and I was managing 30 crores of deployment of a Canadian film in India, hiring everybody, and all of this I was doing as a 21-year-old. And I was being paid weekly, and I was saving up my money to buy a house. So that ambition drove me, just drove mountains, I feel like. And I think, you know, there is a superpower you have when you are a have-not.
Right.
You know, you just have this such a huge burning desire of doing something, and of not knowing limitations, and of not overthinking the limitations. And it's a superpower. You know, when we get jaded with time, we get jaded with like possibilities that this won't happen, that won't happen, that person will judge us, let's not ask. I have lived a life of freely asking. You know, mostly people will say no, but I just feel like ask, write emails, find those emails, hustle, ask.
Generosity will come, yeah.
Abundance will come, you know. 2010, in fact, this is a really cool story, I'll tell you in short. 2010, I was nominated for my first Oscar, that for a film called Kavi. Thank you. And 2007, I moved to Bombay. So 2010, I was nominated for a first short film Oscar. And 2009, I had come off a huge personal tragedy where I had lost both my parents. And I did buy a house for them, but we never moved into that as a family. I got very disillusioned about house and property, but as a 22-year-old, I did buy a house, which I was very proud of in my life. And I moved to Bombay lock, stock, barrel. And a year later, I was nominated for an Oscar, and I literally had no money. And all I wanted to do was go attend the Oscars and experience it. You know, as a dreamer, as a filmmaker, as a young entrepreneur trying to figure out my own way. It's like once to go to America and LA and, you know, at least experience Oscars, be in the audience and see it. We've only seen it through TV. And I started writing emails to textbook rich people, you know, like just Ratan Tata's office, Richard Branson's office. I didn't know any better. So I just started writing 10, 12 emails a day. And in those emails, I wrote, I am the pride of India. I would love you to sponsor me so I can go to US and attend the Oscars. My film is nominated, and this hustle is also time limited because I even need to try for an visa. Yeah. It's like 4 or 5 weeks, and you have to do everything in those 4 or 5 weeks. So every day I used to write 10, 20 emails and feel like, you know, that's all I can do is at least put my thought out there and ask. You know, rest is not in my hand what is going to happen, but I have to do my effort. And I used to do that very sincerely. And I was raising money for my small kid who was in the film, whose name the film was, for my first assistant director who literally made the film. So raising money for 3 of us, and visa and air ticket and staying there for 7-8 days. And as I kept asking every day with very little response, no response, I spoke to Air India, I wrote to British Airways, I wrote to whoever, whatever I could think, their PR, and this is 2010. And then I got really frustrated and I wrote to the President of India. And I got a reply. from Honorable Mrs. Pratibha Patil, and her office called me and said, you know, what are you looking at doing? I said, ma'am, I'm the pride of India. You know, I just want to tell you if you've not realized it. Self-assumed. I'm the pride of India and I really need to go to the Oscars. So I actually was a little bit more smart and I did not make my ask on the call. I was like, it's so cheap to just ask somebody on the call, right? So I was like, we'd like to come and show you our film. Can you give us 15 minutes? That was my first ask. They were like, sure, we'll host a screening at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. And I said, yes, but we need to do this very fast. It can't
Because
be
visa.
Like, no, because, you know, we have
process.
to. Then we have to.
Yeah.
In my emails, I had also written an email to Kingfisher, and their office had called me and said, I still remember his EA had called me, Tushita Patel had called me and said, we don't fly international. So I was like, okay, I just thought maybe you had partner airlines. Like, no, we don't fly international. So I was like, okay, but if there's something in India, you can tell us. So I wrote her an email, can you please give me tickets to Rashtrapati Bhavan, to Delhi? Immediately. So she's like, okay. I said, you know, my whole crew is 24 people. I'd like to take the whole crew to Rashtrapati Bhavan. She said, you want 24 free tickets? I said, yeah. So they said, I can't give you 24 free tickets. I said, how many can you give me? She said, 12. I said, done. 24 one way, we will all come back on a train. So that's...
What great negotiation there.
24 of us landed at Rashtrapati Bhavan. I mean, as growing up, young kids, who's seen Rashtrapati Bhavan from inside, right, to host a screening? And that led to many more conversations, that led to introduction to many more. I was introduced to the Science and Technology Minister back then, and then he called up Air India. And slowly, strength to strength to strength, in a couple of weeks, I got visas for all of us. I got sponsorship of tickets. Our entire story, one journalist found me in 2010 and wrote the story on Midday. And that got Cox and Kings to call me and say, we would like to give you your hotel. You know, so just everything worked out. And even when I went there, the first thing I did was I went to a Gurdwara, you know, and made full Sardar colleagues as, you know, and I could also organize our food in LA was because going to the Gurdwara.
This is what persistence and passion looks like.
But this is how it started, you know, this is how dreams started. It didn't come easy, but I think there's been a lot of self-grooming of finding stories, of falling in love with stories. It matters to me on what we show on screen, how we show it. I feel like, again, we will all go and these stories will leave behind. In fact, even today when you were saying that one can look back and join those dots over 2 decades of work, it means something to me that, you know, I didn't back then think that someday I will sit and join dots. You know, you live life one day at a time, you make films one at a time. But there's definitely a sense of, there's definitely realization in retrospective that there is impact and there is a certain taste that impact matters a lot to me, and those are the stories that I'm gravitated to. And then those are the stories I want to tell, and I enter the room with so much passion that somehow I find the money and somehow I find people who have faith, and I've never let them down, because I think intention is where it starts from, and then the universe comes together.
Guneet, you are such a positive and bright person that I almost feel guilty asking you this question, but we spoke about so many positives until now. But were there also setbacks? Were there also challenges?
All the time. A lot of judgment. There's a lot of judgment for young people, you know, which I found is very classic to India, I feel. And especially as a young entrepreneur coming into an industry, it's almost like, you know, you would not know enough. You know, we've been around, we know a lot. So there's a lot of that kind of roadblock. Of course, being a young woman, navigating the industry, there have been lots of setbacks, lots of challenges, lots of judgments, lots of, you know, because you're also in the center of money management. But you know, if I genuinely feel like if you can just, I think honesty is a virtue that is just not, that is highly underestimated. You know, even if one has, as a young entrepreneur, made a mistake or has a certain question, I just feel one can ask and you'll find the solution for that. And that's always what I have done. I've had large setbacks for many times, of course. limited with money, limited with thoughts, ideas, but I just think it has never really stopped my work. And I'm an anomaly because I stand here having produced 40 plus features and 100 plus short films, 20 plus documentaries, you know.
So this judgment that you face, these roadblocks that you face, is that also why you are leading something like the WIF, so that the women that
Women
follow you have it a
I'm
little
very
easier?
passionate about it, you know. So I was mentored by Women in Film chapter in LA, and it just brought tears in my eyes by, you know, the sisterhood, and you could go somewhere to ask your questions or even to have contacts. Why do we have to climb mountains one at a time? You know, we can just pass information freely. And I think in all other industries, I feel like there's a lot more sharing of information than ours. So this is just an organization to upskill and skill development. We make 2,000 plus films in India, and only less than 3% of them are directed by women. So definitely, you know, we should change that across the whole sector, across the whole spectrum of filmmaking. Production design, costume, editing, VFX, I think writing, we were less than 10% across the whole spectrum. So this whole, I think, a gender that makes half the sun and half the sky deserves more chances. And this is just a thought of putting together an organization that can upskill and that can create more opportunities. And for all the exposure I've had a ton of scholarships in my life that allowed me to go to Cannes. And I say this very humbly, but I've had 9 films officially selected in Cannes, 14 in Toronto, which are all, thank you, which are all like, you know, very big deal in our profession to go and represent your country and your storytelling. That means you're one of the best in the world to come and, you know, be selected here officially. At Sundance, Venice, and that allowed my exposure to happen. Exposure sits at the center of India to the world story. You know, we travel and we expose ourselves and we learn the vocabulary of how one can pitch, of what are the production standards around the world, and that's what you bring back to your country, to your people, and slowly make your corner, you know, significant, that everybody around the world takes notice. And yes, the Oscar helps.
Just for the uninitiated, you know, the Women in Films India chapter made their debut in Cannes this year under her leadership, and 3 stellar women producers were presented there by her. So loud note of applause to her for that.
Thank you.
This is equally important work as much as filmmaking.
Absolutely, and this, you know, I think Women in Film, the India chapter allows anybody who's interested in impact and to be part of the industry. It's a beautiful way inside the industry to be able to work with the board and work with us to really change that stats over the next decade. Right. In fact, this is a sari that I wore for my first Oscar lunch, and it's made in Kerala by a brand called Roku. So they gifted me, and it's a Kerala sari, so I was very excited. From that day, I've worn it today. I was very excited to come to Kochi and
yes, the
represent my little
yes.
elephant. In fact, even with Elephant Whisperers, when we were in LA, it's very hard to do the marketing campaign. And in fact, so there is this Oscar lunch that happens a month before the Oscars, where they bring in all the nominees, and every nominee comes in with a +1 plus studio head. So it's a room, huge room like this, and all the nominees are called on the stage for a big photo op, and then it's networking. Just, you know, everybody gets to meet with each other, and there are around 200 plus nominees, and everybody's in the stage. And this was the sari I wore to that lunch, and this was my marketing, because I was like, I look like an Indian, and I was like, the Indian film, Elephant Whisperers, I used the whole campaign. I was there for 45 days. I wore elephants every day. And I went into every room wearing elephants, saying, yeah, that's my film, just so you know, you can consider looking at it. You can't ask for vote directly, but...
A visual storyteller in all senses.
I went to other big screenings wearing elephants, you know, because there were many voters in other screenings. So I went everywhere wearing elephants, three other places a day, just so that I could meet everybody else in the audiences and be like, yeah, that's Do you know that film?
While we are on the topic of attires, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Sunny Kapoor here. He's a fashion entrepreneur himself and the
My
very
husband.
supportive spouse of Guneet Monga.
My husband. Yes,
Her pillar, I would say.
absolutely. Everything. Please stand up.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for being with us here today.
Thank you.
And I'd like to bring you back on the process question of two things. One is the process of how do you select stories and the business modeling around it. I ask this particularly because in an industry where passion supersedes process, how do you arrive at that sustainable business model where the creative can coexist with
It's
business?
a great question. Thank you. Yes, we are in a passionate, dreamy industry, and that is one aspect of it. But there's also commerce, and there is hardcore commerce. It's 100% equity. It's equity money that one is responsible for, and I, as a producer, sit right in the middle of it. So I sit with the director and an absolute dreamer of an ideal world and an ideal, my way of making this film, and this is the broad strokes, and this is how I see it. And I sit with the money, which is like, how much am I getting back? When? So I'm absolutely at the center of it, and making that bridge and learning that language every day so that I can continue doing more. It's very important to be aware and to do your, like you make any company, you make your business plan. So here, every film is like a company. You make your low, middle, and high case scenario, and you sit with your investors, and it can be a studio, it can be a person, it can be, the color of the money is the same. I mean, at the end of the day, it's hardcore equity, and it needs to be returned. And if anybody here understands the VC business, it needs to work like that because it works across many IPs. You can't just put all your eggs in one basket and be like, okay, this film is going to make me a millionaire. Diversify. If you have to come into the business of movies, come in for 10 films. And only then, you'll be able to really see the benefit of it, because one of them will definitely crush the box office. The other will win awards. The others will break even. And at the end, you will have a legacy. You will have a pipeline that you can keep licensing, because the IP has a lot of value. And IP licensing keeps happening after the first tenure, it goes again for TV rights, for digital rights. So you sit down and you make your business plan. So when I was making Lunchbox, this is a very interesting story, because I went in the market and I'd produced Gangs of Wasseypur before that, and Shaitan Shahid, around 20 films. And when we started Lunchbox, people were like, oh, so you want to make a film with no songs? That's like one revenue item not there, with a brand new actress, first time film, Nimrat. And then they were like, oh, so much of this film is in English, So I face this a lot of time, because a lot of work that I've done doesn't have precedence. So you can't be like, this is like that one, There's no reference point. Like there was no reference point for Kill, and there was no reference point for Lunchbox. And I'd got a scholarship to go to Cannes, and I was studying producing, just understanding how it happens around the world. So the whole of Europe, whole of Canada, whole of Australia, New Zealand, Korea, work with government financing. And filmmaking is seen as art and culture. And the taxpayers' money goes into funding films, the whole of Europe, Canada, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and even parts of Korea. And I was like, oh, so this is not like the pressure of equity, but this is about art. As long as you represent our values, our people, our color, our craft, that's what matters to that kind of funding.
Right.
And I started studying it, and I realized that actually India has signed a treaty with France in 1985, and nobody had ever used it. I was the first one to use it in 2011, and I was able to raise 55% of my investment on Lunchbox from France, which was non-recoupable money. And suddenly, when I went back to the same investors for Lunchbox, the whole film was only 45% equity. So they were like, okay, this makes sense. Because suddenly it becomes very exciting than asking for 100% of the money.
Viable, yeah.
It becomes very viable. And I think that kind of conversation, then the pressure of putting the songs was not there. And in fact, Lunchbox went on to make 100 plus crores outside India, and is hugely celebrated. Thank you. was hugely celebrated and marked to be India's first Indo-French film. And that is at the center of taking our conversation forward. You know, that kind of knowing, and that for me is producing. You know, because structuring the film is as beautiful as telling of the story. You know, that I feel like films like Kumbhagani Nights, films like, you know, Minnal Murli, or even Manjuman Boys or Avesham. I mean, there's such incredible work that is happening here, and that can travel far greater and larger, and I'm in awe, you know. I was part of Jellico too, so yeah.
Yes. So you spoke about that business aspect so brilliantly, but looking at your body of work, it is impossible to think that you ever put the story aspect, the content, on a second footing. You've always put it at the top. So how was it at the beginning when you did not have this body of work to show?
It's very interesting. So, as a 21-year-old, when I went to Bombay, my neighbor in Delhi, we were on rent on the second floor, and Mr. Kamlesh Agarwal was on first floor. And he met me one day and he said, you know, you've studied mass communication in your college in graduation. I was working through my college, but yes, I have a mass communication degree. So he said, you've studied mass communication. I am thinking of making a studio. It was his plan. And you know, we will make these videos of newborn babies and sell these videos to their parents. And because you understand...
This is which year?
This is 2007.
So much
8,
before the Instagram
6,
collaboration video culture.
2006. It's 2006. So you build that studio. And I said, how much money you want to put in this? He said, 50 lakhs. I said, very bad idea. You should give me this money and I'll go to Bombay and make a film. And he agreed. So yeah, that's how. I came to Bombay. I knew nobody. And I started sitting at the food court in one mall, Infinity Mall. And I would meet people at food court. And the only people, you know, I knew were equipment vendors. Because in Delhi, I used to hire big cameras and big lights that were specialty stuff that was not available in Delhi for shoot. So I only knew like light boys and, you know, equipment camera vendors. And I used to ask them, do you know an assistant director who knows a director? I used to sit in food court every day and say, I have 50 lakhs. Does anybody have a story? Do tell me. And that's how I found, after a few months, I found a story which was called Say Salam India, my first film, children cricket film, rich school, poor school, absolute underdog sports film, last ball, you know, the crescendo goes up and magic happens and the underdogs win. So that kind of a film. Very Jojita Vai Sikandar and that kind of, you know, sports drama. The underdog sports drama. And that's where I was then able to raise another 25. The director had another 75 that he was coming on the table with. And in 1.5 crores, we made a film called Say Salam India. And that was my first film as a producer. And we made it in 2006 to be released in 2007 when India had gone for the World Cup. And and to our great luck, the day the film released, India came out of the elementary round in 2007 World Cup. And it was the worst season for Indian World Cup. And all the cinemas were just like, please take this cricket film out of here. Our cinemas will get burnt. And they were like, give us old films. Give us Namaste London. Give us Beja Fry. Give us, you know, older films that we don't want this Say Salam India. And we thought we were cool, you know, like we were gearing up to the cricket season and making a film at the back of it and releasing it, and nothing worked. And I had then taken up a job in Gajni that was happening in Bombay, and I had to resign from there. And I said, and that was my neighbor's money. And I said, you know, I don't know how to go back home if I don't. And he totally understood. He said, you know, India lost the World Cup. It's not your fault. And, you know, bad things happen in business. It's not your fault. And I was like, no, but if I don't return you this money, I don't deserve to be a producer. Just my own standards for my own self. And he said, okay, what is your plan? So I didn't have a plan, but I went back to my school. I had come out of my school, I think, 5 years before that. I went to my school and I said, you know, you used to watch movies and we used to go watch movies at 50 rupees per child, and we used to collect, you know, money and take us to a single screen. Can you please do that? I spoke to my principal and she said yes. 1,000 kids, 50 rupees per kid, 50,000 rupees. And then I went to a single screen behind my house, Sapna Cinema in Kailash Colony. And I was like, what is the money you make in morning 9 to 12 show? They said 7,000, 8,000. I did a deal with them. I said, I'll give you 10,000. You'll give me a cinema. He said, done. So 1,000 kids came, 50,000 a show, 10,000 for the theatre guy, 40,000 for me. And, and the kids loved the film. And they were clapping and jumping, and when the crescendo goes up and the last ball, and you just, that cheer, that's the moment you make films for. You have goosebumps, and you're just like, it translated, when you really meet your target audience and the joy on their face, the music, the everything. It's magic when picture and music comes together. In my world, it is magic, because otherwise you're only seeing moving picture and you're seeing sound, and when it comes together, it's just, oof, beautiful. So the impact of that on audience and the impact of cinematic experience, that we talk about and we live for. I mean, people like me live for that cinematic experience. And I went back to my principal and I said, would you give me a letter of appreciation? She said, yes. I took that letter straight to DPS RK Puram, which had 25,000 kids. And I did the same deal, and 20 shows happened at RK Puram Cinema Hall. And I did 350 shows like this, made all the money back for my investor in 9 months.
This is how entrepreneurs scale.
And then I sold the Interval for another 20,000 to brands. And I was like, yeah, Interval 15 minutes, it's up to me. Then I sold all the CDs that nobody was buying. I made stalls outside each show. And my CD production guy was crying that his 10,000 CDs have gone waste because nobody's watching the film. And I asked him how much is his cost. He said 10 rupees. I said, give me all of them. And then I sold them for 25 rupees each. So, and when summer vacations happen in Delhi, I moved to Panipat, Sonipat, Karnal, Chandigarh, the whole belt. And I did 350 shows. Yeah.
In the phrase creative entrepreneur, I'm struggling with, which aspect has more weightage. Is it the creative part of you that has more weight, or is it the entrepreneur? I really can't decide, because this is brilliant business lessons here.
No, absolutely. And I feel like, we don't have a large scale of children's cinema because distribution is broken. And somewhere very early, I was able to navigate that distribution with tying up with a fixed audience that is anyways ready to watch the film, and cinemas that will program, fixed programming, pre-sold tickets, But I went on to do other things in life. But I still feel like children's film on scale in India, or animations at scale, we all show up for a Pixar film. We all show up for so much of West work. But, it's waiting to happen in India. And it will. Maybe we'll do it, but at the right time.
Yes. So bringing you back to that process question, the second process question, we know that a film going to the Oscar and actually winning it, it's not just about making a good film. There's a whole business process behind it. Can you give us a peek about that?
Humbly.
Yes.
It is India's first Oscar in 100 years of Indian cinema, 100 plus years of Indian cinema, for any Indian film. So thank you. I mean, we've never made films for awards. It's just the honest truth. We just make films that, touches the heart. And the story of Elephant Whisperers is so amazing and beautiful, and I think destiny. Elephant Whisperers was a cold submission on my email. It was just sent to me as a pitch trailer. The director, Kartiki Gonzalez, she's absolutely incredible. And she is a natural history photographer and lived in Ooty. And on one day on her drive, saw this mahout with a baby elephant, and then found out the story that he's orphan. Raghu was the name of the elephant. He's orphan, and mahout is taking care of him, and that's a program run by the Tamil Nadu government for rehabilitation of wild elephants, and almost making human and wild connection. That story was very beautiful and fascinating for her. So she just met them for a whole year, and just like with her little, she was a still photography person, natural history photographer. And she just, shot on her own. For a year, just went and made friends with the mahout and Raghu, the elephant, and saw him grow, saw him play, and put music, made like a little under 5 minute trailer, put music behind it, and sent it to many people as a cold submission.
Like your emails.
Yeah, like on an email. And I just saw that trailer. In fact, that trailer is still there on YouTube under the name of Sacred Bond. That was the name that she had given to the film. And I was just like, this has amazing potential. Let's try and figure this out. At the same time, that cold email had also gone to Netflix office. And that's when I had called up Netflix, or Netflix had called me, and they were like, if you do it, we'll just do it. So we came together to do it. So that was a bit of a destiny, because Netflix came on board on the pitch trailer, we came on board on the pitch trailer, and then we started the journey of making the film. And as we made the film, I think because Kartiki, before even I was on the film for 3.5 years, she was on the film for 5+ years. And for a 40-minute short film, you would wonder, there was 500+ hours of footage. And there was just so much of wild and jungle and, scientists and conversation and conservation and one question that somebody had asked, there's this beautiful line in Elephant Whispers where Baman and Belly, the incredible, they come from an indigenous community. They were like, we get everything we need from the jungle, and we service the jungle. We also give back, but we take how much is enough, And they said this line, and it's in the film. And that always just brings tears to my eyes, because I think we are living in a world where nothing is enough. And when you look at the perspective from another world, and they're like, we get everything from our habitat, and we take what we need, And they work in the jungles, and they work with the animals and with wild animals. And I think on the journey, we found incredible mentors and put together a 40-minute film. And we had no idea that this would go all the way. In fact, I landed the day the film released on 8th of December, and I got married on 12th of December, so 2022. And the second I landed for my honeymoon in Vietnam, I got an email that you're shortlisted. And I was ready to abandon the honeymoon, because I was like, I have to go to LA. I have to champion the film. But there was a lot of work that needed to be done. So it's in many stages. It's in many stages of marketing and putting it out there. But we had very good offices of Netflix and their years of learning. But it is hosting screenings and putting it out to a whole new audiences of voting. And which is not, I've not spent 2 decades making connections in LA. I spent 2 decades in Bombay and just knowing everybody there in our industry. So everything added up.
I'm not sure if lobbying is the right word. Is that done a lot?
I used fashion to do whatever I needed to do, because you need to start a conversation with a bunch of new people who have hundreds of films in front of them, and they are your voters. Hundreds of films from around the world, and you just have 6-8 weeks to be able to put forward your work and get to the next level. So there are 3 levels. So you first get shortlisted, which is top 15. Then you get nominated, which is top 5. Even being nominated is a very, very big deal. This year, we were nominated with a film called Anuja. We did not win. It is also on Netflix. But 2023, we were incredibly blessed to win. And in 2019, we won for Period End of Sentence. So it's been, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for 2 months of being there, of a lot of money and a lot of insights. But it really, if you break it down, it is hosting screenings and making sure a lot of people show up for your voters, show up for the screening. So, and that is just a lot of industry professionals call people and then they invite people. That's how it works.
There's a lot of aspects of filmmaking that, gets a film like this to that podium. So, yes, loud round of applause for all of that work that went behind. So before we hand it over to the audience for a couple of questions, I have one quick round-up question. And this is about what's the advice that you have for any woman creative entrepreneur who's trying to make an entry into the scene?
If you face judgment, it is not your problem. It is the problem of the person sitting opposite you, you know? So it's their it's their problem if they can't look you in the eye and have a conversation. It's their problem if you know, they if you feel, I mean, you know, it's never black and white. It's not like I will not do business with you because you're a woman. You know, it's those soft things that you feel, like you feel not equal, you feel unheard, you feel people talking on top of you and just cutting you. You feel the person in front is just like, I know it all, let me tell you, you know. So it's a, you know, and it's a soft skill. And I think women feel it more because we just live in those spaces of being cut or of being, you know, just talked over, you know, and just being assumed that she would not know enough. Oh, you can't handle it, let me do it. You know, that kind of, I would say, you know, a bigger attitude. Like, and it's patriarchy, you know. We're all born in patriarchy. I don't think it's fault, it's our upbringing. We are all born with patriarchy, and we learn about, so what we are born with is we inherit patriarchy. It's years of patriarchy. It's years of women running the house. I mean, not in Kerala, but rest of the country. Women running the house, and men are the breadwinners. And it's so generational, you know. It's so inbuilt. So patriarchy. I mean, everybody here knows what this word means. So I think we wake up every day learning how to, you know, take one step forward and maybe be able to, in that room, be able to very respectfully say, but no, I need to make my point clear. And this is my work that I need to get done. Because you will be very easily labeled as, oh, she's very aggressive, oh, she's by this, oh, she's, you know, just, you're always labeled. So firstly, to all women, I would say all the judgment that you feel is not your problem. So don't take those labels on yourself. It's somebody else's problem who's thinking about those labels. So firstly, don't sit with those labels. And secondly, the most important is that we're not each other's competition. I just think that we're all being told that it's either you or her in this job. I mean, it's all of us, you know. So we are companions and collaborators like everyone else. It's normal. And I think it's very important to celebrate each other when we are not in the room, when the other person is not in the room. So having that culture of talking about another woman up, you know, in the rooms that you are in will really help. And rest, get your work done, you know, leave everything aside. Just keep moving forward. Yeah.
Let your actions speak. Yeah.
I've had those things, you know, where I've been on set and people will not talk to me, not look at the eye, you know, labor will not listen, you know, and I'll be like, no, I am the boss. You have to. Sometimes you have to be on that attitude, and the others, it's, you know, like on cigarette breaks, there are people who go and close an agreement while I'm waiting for everybody in the conference room. They're like, oh, we closed it. I said, no, you have to explain it to me. Hello? You know, so just trying to put yourself out there as humbly, assertively as possible.
I may call you POI Mongachi, right? Pride of India.
Ah, thank you.
You know, so we need to change your, the initials. My question, your parents requested a house. You got them an Oscar in absentia. Did they talk to you from heaven?
They do.
Okay.
They do, very deeply.
How was that feeling?
Beautiful. They talk to me all the time. I am on a spiritual journey, I feel, and I feel like my guru and both my parents are up there. They're my superpower. I enter a room and I'm constantly in conversation with them. And that is a whole separate conversation in life, which, you know, you feel even more closer. It's when, you know, grief has all its stages, and you reach a stage in grief where there is such deep acceptance, from denial to anger to acceptance, that there is such deep acceptance that you feel even more deeply connected with them than they were in human form. You know, you see faults in people in human form, but when they're not there in a human form, they're just this beautiful giving energy, and they are, you know, just so much love. So I experience it all the time.
So
they come in my dreams.
So you have the blessed parent syndrome.
Yes. Yes.
That's a very good syndrome. Keep it up. Good luck.
Thank you. I guilt them all the time. You know, I got married at 39 and I wanted to get married at 18. So by the time I was 37, I was like, whoever says yes to me, I will get married. Now you figure it out. So I'm in the business of guilting them to get my needs fulfilled. Yeah.
She's in the business of a whole lot of successful things. Loud round of applause for
Thank you. Thank you so much.